to get started with today's webinar, Mastering the Interview and Beyond. In our final webinar in this series, we'll be walking you through the interview process and hopefully have you leaving here today with a little bit more information on what to expect and how to make the best impression. Now, before we get started, I wanted to introduce our presenters today, all of whom are a part of our very own training and development team. We're joined today by some familiar voices in our webinar staples, Jenna Gillio, Sarah Snyder, and Dr. Amy Dietzman. So now I'll go ahead and pass it on over to them. Jenna?
Thanks so much, Maxine. So really quickly, I just want to give another recap of the series. So previously, we laid the foundation by exploring career mapping and beginning your job search. We dissected the resume writing process while providing some different pointers on nailing that step of the job hunt. And we tackled how you can increase your chances of getting that interview. For those of you who have attended, we hope you've enjoyed this series so far. And for those who didn't catch them, again, be sure to check those out on YouTube. Now, in our final session of the series, we're going to be diving into interview basics and tips for success in the interview process and beyond. Again, my name is Jenna Gillio, and I serve on Tutor.com's team as the training content manager. And in today's webinar, I'm joined by my colleague, Sarah Snyder, Director of Training and Process Improvement, and Dr. Amy Dietzman, Senior Director of Learning Strategies and Professional Development. So if you are new to the series, Amy and Sarah are actually posing as job seekers, and I'll be acting as their career coach as they navigate their job search. We'll chat with them here in a few moments, but first, let's take a look at the agenda for today's mock career advising session. We're going to begin with how you can set yourself up for success before landing the interview. We'll discuss common interview question types and what employers are looking for in your responses. We'll share tips for preparing for both in-person and virtual interviews. And then finally, we'll end by revisiting best practices for thank you notes. So before we jump in, I'd like to briefly introduce or reintroduce our job seekers. So Amy and Sarah, why don't you remind everyone what you're looking for and what you've been doing? We'll start with Amy.
Hi, I am just about to graduate from college with a bachelor's degree in hospitality management. I've been working as a hostess in a restaurant all through school. I haven't had any other jobs, but I am looking for a job in hospitality or a job with a heavy focus on customer service. I recently looked on Indeed for a job and I found one for an event planner that really interested me.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy, for the recap. We'll turn it over to Sarah. How about you, Sarah? Sarah, you may be muted.
I'm here, thanks. I am currently working as a data entry clerk in a marketing firm. I've been here a few years, and this company isn't particularly interested in promoting from within. So I'm looking for new positions where I would be able to employ my marketing background, but move into one that also uses my creativity more. I'm in a little different place in my career than Amy, since I've had a bit of experience in the workplace. And I have some at least adjacently relevant work history that I've highlighted in my resume and I can draw on in my interview. I am interviewing for the role of entry-level creative assistant in a natural foods health business.
Excellent. Well, thanks to you both, Amy and Sarah, and we will come back to you both shortly. So the time you spend waiting for a call or an email inviting you to interview after submitting a job application can feel a little bit unsettling. Fortunately, there are some different things that you can do in the meantime to set yourself up for success. This may seem intuitive, but it's important that you know the content of your resume backwards and forwards. Interviewers may reference information from your resume throughout the interview, so you want to be prepared to address any questions or concerns that they may have. You never get a second chance to make a first impression, and employers often form their initial impression of you long before you introduce yourself in an interview. In fact, 95% of recruiters are likely to check your online presence before even contacting you about a position. With that said, you'll want to do an honest self-assessment of your digital footprint well before you begin applying. So consider, is your email address professional? Remember, the most ideal format for an email is some variation of your first and last name separated by a period. And be sure to use a reputable email provider like Gmail or Outlook, and steer clear of any outdated or less professional providers like Yahoo or Hotmail. Do you have a polished voicemail message? If an employer reaches your voicemail, you want to make sure that your message is clear and concise. It's also a good idea to clearly state your first and last name so that they know that they've reached the correct phone number. Is your social media presence clean? More than 50% of employers report rejecting a candidate after scanning their social media profiles. Employers are looking to see how your online activities will reflect on their organization. So it's a good idea to scrub your social media of anything that might be perceived as unprofessional or create a poor first impression. Things like politically charged posts, unprofessional language or attire, etc. Your safest bet is probably going to be setting all of your accounts to private if at all possible. Unfortunately, there is no way of knowing exactly what questions you'll be asked during an interview, but you can still practice and prepare your responses. Most interview questions are going to be related to your previous work experience, any experience in the field, technical or relevant knowledge, or how well your credentials align with the needs of their organization. So rather than trying to nail down a specific response to a question, practice speaking about your professional experience and prepare a handful of anecdotes or examples that will best illustrate the value you can bring to their organization. So for an example, perhaps you were able to tweak a previous project to meet a last-minute request from a very important client and save the day. The client was so impressed that they signed a 2-year extension and requested to have you as their personal point of contact. Having a few examples like this in your back pocket will better equip you to answer any question that's thrown your way. The most commonly asked interview question is also the most nuanced. Tell me about yourself. Employers generally ask some variation of this question at the start of an interview to break the ice, but you want to be mindful of how you respond to it, as it can set the tone for the rest of the interview. Interviewers are legally not allowed to ask you questions regarding your marital status, family, political affiliation, your age, etc. So while revealing personal information about yourself may seem harmless, it can potentially open the door to unwanted bias and preferences that might ultimately cost you the role. So remember, it's your professional self that you're presenting for evaluation. So it's best to keep your responses to this question strictly professional and establish that as the tone right out of the gate. You might even consider preparing a short script, including things like your education background, industry-related experience, and your reason for pursuing a job at their organization. Of course, you won't be able to reference this script during an interview, but practice it so that you're prepared to answer the question when it's inevitably asked. During a job interview, you'll likely encounter different types of questions, each designed to gather specific information about you as a professional. Understanding why interviewers ask each question type can help you better prepare your responses before an interview. So let's start with questions that assess personality. Some different examples of questions that assess personality include, tell me about yourself. What are you passionate about? And what strengths would you add to this role? Employers often ask these questions in an effort to learn more about who the candidate is as a person and an employee. Responses to these questions may help the interviewer determine whether the candidate is a good fit for the job and the company culture. So let's practice a few of these questions. We'll start with Amy. So Amy, since this question is so commonly asked, let's start with, tell me about yourself.
All right, I'm Amy Dietzman. I just graduated from North City College with a degree in hospitality management. While I was in college, I maintained a 4.0 GPA while also being very involved in my sorority and other campus and community outreach projects. I also worked at a local restaurant as a hostess for 4 years in my time in college. I worked hard to earn my way into event planning for the restaurant, which included contract negotiations, collaboration with vendors, and meeting customer needs. I loved that part of my job, and I realized that a role in event planning was really where I saw myself after graduation. When I saw this job posting, I was thrilled to see that my experience and my passion could align in one place. I may not have a lot of experience, but I will certainly make up for that with my educational background and my enthusiasm for working as an event planner for Highway and Transportation Corporation.
Excellent job, Amy. I want to point out a couple of really important points that you made. First, you didn't get too personal. You talked about your experiences in school and your passion for what you do, and kept your personal life out of the response altogether. Too often, people feel the need to tell personal details about things like their kids, their parents, their living situations, etc., when they answer this question. You want to try to prevent any potential bias from creeping in. So keep your answer succinct and focused on your work experience, or in your case, Amy, your college experience as well. You also made it clear in your response that you knew about the company. You knew what the job posting was for, which seems obvious, but you would be surprised how many people don't know this. And you showed enthusiasm for the company as well. So really well done. I'd like to hear your response for this one too, Sarah. So go ahead and tell me about yourself.
Okay, my name is Sarah. I have both a bachelor's degree in business administration and 5 years of experience working in data management for a private marketing firm. I handle all the administrative aspects of processing data into usable metrics for future campaign decisions. I am self-taught in Canva, and I have used it to create a number of visually appealing personal projects. I am known by my colleagues for my strong eye for details. And while I am very strong in data, I am also a highly creative person. So I'm looking to expand my marketing experiences into a position that can take full advantage of my creativity. I feel this position provides a great balance between what I've already proven in my current role with what I'm ready to prove outside of it.
Great answer. You did a nice job here of hitting the highlights like education and experience without dwelling on them. You focused instead on your strengths, your initiative and self-teaching, and where you think this position brings you new opportunities. It can be important to emphasize that a job isn't exactly like the one that you're coming from and why you think that acts in your favor. So nice job. Let's go back to Amy for one more of these personality-focused questions. So let's try this one. Why do you want to work here?
Well, I'm excited about the opportunity to work for the Highway and Transportation Corporation because I deeply admire the organization's commitment to improving transportation systems and promoting innovation in the field. Through my research, I've been impressed by the Highway and Transportation Corporation's influential role in shaping transportation policies and practices across the country, and I'm eager to contribute to this mission. I'm confident that my strong organizational skills, attention to detail, and ability to manage complex projects will enable me to execute successful events that advance the organization's objectives and foster meaningful engagement with your stakeholders.
This answer is really great because you've demonstrated a passion for the company. Nothing says that you want this job more than being able to identify all the reasons why the company itself appeals to you, while also demonstrating that you did your research. A common pitfall with this question is when candidates respond with something like, I want to work from home when it's a remote job, or the commute is better than what I have now for an on-site job, or something like, I'm tired of doing what I've been doing and I just want to do something else. These responses don't demonstrate why you want to work at this particular organization. So expect this question to be asked and do your research. Know ahead of time why you really want to work there and prepare your answer. Now, the next question type are those that demonstrate your ability. Interviewers will often ask these questions to determine how well your abilities match those required of the position. So here's a list of sample questions that you might come across in this category. Describe your responsibilities in your current or previous role. Tell me about a time that you spearheaded a project. And what are your strengths and weaknesses? Let's try this very commonly asked question, Sarah. What is your biggest professional weakness?
My biggest weakness is delegating tasks. Not being able to delegate appropriately leaves me with more on my plate than I really should have, so I'm pulled in too many directions at once. While there might be an element of control there, it's more often that it comes down to efficiency. I know that I work hard, I know that I work well, and I know that I work quickly. So I sometimes struggle to delegate to someone when it could be faster to simply complete it myself. To work on growing here, I have been identifying tasks and projects that meet the strengths of my team members so that I know that while I may not be handing it off to someone who is as efficient as I am, I'm at least handing it off to someone who can succeed at it. I'm also working on identifying tasks that can help my team members grow. Just because something is not a strength should not mean there's no place for you there. It's only through challenge, not through certain success, that we grow professionally. And in both of those cases, what I'm learning is how to provide very clear instructions and expectations, keeping a clear line of communication open so that in both of those situations, they can receive the support they need in taking on the assigned task or project that I've given to them.
This response is both honest and strategic. Not only do you pick a legitimate weakness, but you share why it's a weakness, that you end up with too much on your plate, and you make it clear you've done some self-reflection when you describe why you struggle with it, that it's not so much about control as it is about efficiency. Often when we ask this question, we hear the problem, but we don't hear what someone is actually doing about it. The way you outline steps you're taking to address this weakness show that you have a growth mindset and a desire to make meaningful changes in this area. Nice work. While questions that give you the opportunity to demonstrate ability have a broad span of application, you're almost certain to be asked to report on an experience that you've had or a situation that you've been in. One of the best ways to frame your response to a question like this is to follow the STAR method. We're going to outline it here and then see it played out in practice. So starting with S, which is for situation. This is setting the stage succinctly for your story. You need to give context to what the situation was. You might also think of this as the problem statement. What was the problem at the heart of this scenario? T is for task. What was the task that you needed to accomplish? This is going to be something a little bit more tangible. You needed to do XYZ to find the solution to the problem. You needed to accomplish XYZ in whatever given situation. A is for action. What actions did you take to complete the task? This might include how you went about managing your time, how you gathered feedback, how you clarified requirements, etc. While the task outlines what needed to be done, the action outlines how you actually accomplished it. And R is for results. You might also think of it as outcome. It's crucial to any scenario-based question that you not neglect to share the results of your action. If you solved a problem your coworkers had by learning a new software and then teaching it to them, share the results of that investment. What resulted from them learning the software? Did it increase their sales? Did it improve their efficiency? Did it reduce their data entry errors? Be specific about the outcome and quantify it whenever possible. Whatever you do, don't leave out the results or make the interview ask you for them. So let's see how this might play out in practice with a question for Sarah. Sarah, give me an example of a time that you had to meet a tight deadline.
One instance that comes to mind from my current role is the situation of an important campaign launch that required a comprehensive marketing plan. I was tasked with building out a full model that could be implemented at the start, but due to delays elsewhere in the process, I didn't have enough information until a week before launch. So it was my responsibility to create this model under intense time pressure because the launch date could not be moved. To manage the process, I outlined for myself the major milestones and intermediate steps. I collaborated closely with the rest of the team, and I devoted my attention to pulling something together despite the unfortunate circumstances. The result was a stellar model that fully met the needs of the launch from day one and exceeded what anyone thought was possible in the short time we had to build it. This experience reinforced for me my ability to stay organized, to communicate effectively, and to maintain a high standard of work, even under pressure.
Awesome. So let's break down how you use the STAR method in this answer. You clearly laid out the situation, that there was an upcoming launch and you had some responsibility in it. You were concise in describing your task to create a model that could be used immediately. The action you took to complete the task, outlining the milestones and collaborating with the team, were well developed. Something we see so often in interviews is a complete lack of R, what resulted from the action you took. And you did a nice job of following through on your scenario by sharing the results, the model that exceeded expectations. And even more meaningful is sharing the lessons that you learned in the process. Overall, you focused on the specifics as well as the results. Very well done, Sarah. The next question type that you're likely to encounter are those that determine your qualifications. These questions are meant to assess your credentials and previous experience. So here are a few examples. What kind of on-the-job training have you had? Tell me about the certifications that you hold. How can your previous experience benefit this company? Let's practice with this question, Sarah. Why should we choose you over the other candidates we've interviewed?
I believe you should choose me for my combination of experience and room for growth. My background in data analysis provides me with a unique context for approaching campaign design, and my room for growth with the creative side of the role will enhance job satisfaction and output. What also sets me apart is my proactive approach to learning and improvement. Through constant reflection and intentionally seeking out feedback, I am in a constant state of improvement with the quality of my work. Recognizing the need for experience with creative software, for example, I identified Canva as a trending solution and taught it to myself to enhance my skills on my own. I am eager to apply that knowledge professionally, and I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your company's success by combining my strengths with my potential.
You've provided a great summary here of your qualifications and character. Nice job. In addition, there's clear enthusiasm, not just for getting a job, but for getting this job, working for this company. It's really important for a hiring manager to feel that sense of desire from you. The last question type we'll be practicing today are questions that predict behavior. Employers generally pose these questions to get an idea of how you've approached job challenges in the past. Interviewers may request that you provide specific examples or anecdotes of how you resolved the conflicts or met your goals. Here are some questions in this category. Tell me about a time that you reached a professional goal. What do you do to stay motivated in your current role? And do you generally prefer working alone or on a team? Amy, let's practice a couple of questions that aim to predict behavior. We'll start with this one. How would your current colleagues or peers describe you?
Okay, so based on the feedback I've received from my colleagues and my peers, I believe they would describe me as a reliable team player who's always willing to lend a helping hand. I strive to maintain open communication and foster a collaborative environment where everyone feels valued and supported. For example, in my previous role, my colleagues often commented on my ability to remain calm under pressure and find creative solutions to challenges. Additionally, I've received feedback about my strong attention to detail and dedication to producing high-quality events. Overall, I do believe that my colleagues would describe me as somebody who's enthusiastic and hardworking, not afraid to jump into a project and get some work done, and someone who has a positive attitude.
This is an awesome response for a few different reasons. The first being that you kept it very positive, which is crucial. Sometimes we accidentally ramble on when we answer questions like this, and it can be quite easy to sneak into negative territory. You want to stay on topic and again, aim to be succinct. Aim to describe attributes about yourself that align well with the job by highlighting your strengths and your positive character traits. Now, you wouldn't want to say that your peers describe you as great at customer service if you're applying for a job that doesn't have a customer facing aspect. But you could take something like that and turn it into a positive, that you're friendly and easy to get along with. In your response, you also talked about your competence and your willingness to learn and grow. And these are both going to be very appealing traits to a potential employer. Let's try another one. This one is a scenario-based question. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss and what you did about it.
All right. In my role as a hostess, I encountered a situation where I had a disagreement with my boss regarding an event that we were planning for this large corporation. And my boss proposed a strategy that I just didn't think was aligned with what the customer had communicated to us. So I scheduled a one-on-one meeting to discuss my concerns in a respectful and constructive manner. And during that meeting, I presented the details the customer shared with us and why I thought we might need to plan the event just a little bit differently. I made sure to actively listen to my boss's perspective as well, acknowledging the value in considering multiple viewpoints. And then together, we brainstormed an alternative approach to the event, and we ultimately agreed on a revised strategy that incorporated the element of both of our ideas. And then overall, I really believe that handling disagreements professionally and constructively is essential for fostering a positive and productive work environment. Sometimes I know I won't agree with my boss, and I'm not really the type of person to challenge my boss at every turn. But if I do have proof that something may be approached differently, I'm committed to addressing it with respect and a willingness to find mutually beneficial solutions. I'm okay if I'm not always right, but I see everything as a learning experience.
Awesome job, Amy. This is a really tricky question because you could potentially talk yourself right out of a job by describing a time where you were difficult to lead. Instead, you told about a time that you respectfully disagreed with your boss. You chose a time to talk about it that was private and considerate, and then you showed your willingness to collaborate with your boss to come up with the best solution. Remember, when you describe an example in a situation, not to neglect to share the outcome. You don't want to tell about what you did and then not share how it turned out, what was learned, who benefited, etc. That's an important piece to demonstrating your likeliness and potential to have an impact on the organization. Really good job, Amy. Let's have Sarah try this one. Sarah, how do you respond to feedback about your work?
Well, I believe that constructive criticism is essential for the person who wants to grow personally and professionally. I am naturally reflective on my work, so when I receive feedback, I approach it with an open mind and I compare it to my own reflections. Where is there overlap, and where has the feedback pointed out something that I didn't see? I see all feedback as an opportunity to learn and improve, and as a growth-minded individual, I know that I cannot achieve the growth I want without external feedback. As an example, in my current role, I once developed a data tracking and analysis plan that didn't fully meet the needs of the team that I built it for. After receiving detailed feedback about where the team saw gaps, I took the time to carefully review that feedback, ask for clarification where I needed it, and then incorporate it into a more comprehensive tool that did meet their needs. The final product was much stronger and better aligned to what they needed. This experience taught me that feedback is imperative to effectively meeting the needs of others. I always strive to put together the best work I can to best meet whatever expectation has been presented.
So many great elements to this question. First, you continue in this answer to demonstrate your growth mindset. You desire not only to increase knowledge, but also to increase character. And your attitude toward feedback is great. And in terms of how you answered here, I love how you brought in a specific scenario in which you received constructive feedback and how you responded to it. It's fine to speak in hypotheticals, but when you can bring in a real life scenario, your answer becomes immensely more meaningful to the interviewer. And as I mentioned previously, bringing in the lessons the experience taught you brings the whole scenario full circle. Great answer. So, you've scrubbed your social media, you've thoroughly studied your resume, and you've practiced your interview questions. Now, let's fast forward to when you've got the call and landed the interview. Let's talk through what you can do to prepare and ensure that you nail it. If a company presents you with a date and time to interview and you're not positive it will work with your schedule, it's perfectly okay to ask whether it'll be possible to call back and confirm after double checking your calendar. It's best to avoid rescheduling, so be sure to gather their name and callback number and follow up as soon as possible to confirm or request a different time. Once the interview is booked, you'll want to build a comfortable buffer zone into your calendar to account for any last-minute delays, things like traffic or navigating to the interview location. It's best to avoid scheduling more than one interview in a day. If you book back-to-back interviews and the first one doesn't go quite as well as you'd hoped, it may cloud your disposition and frame of mind going into the second interview. And similarly, if you leave the first interview feeling like you've got it in the bag, you may be a little bit less thoughtful and attentive in the next one. So instead, leave yourself room between interviews to thoroughly prepare and recoup. Do your research. If you are fortunate enough to have a connection at the company, prepare a list of questions for them and ask whether they have any insight into the interview process. Gather any tips that may give you a leg up and help you stand out. Explore the company's website. Familiarize yourself with their mission and their vision. How has the company grown and where is their current focus? You'll want to leverage this information during the interview to demonstrate that you've invested time learning and researching about the organization. Once your interview is scheduled, look up the interviewer on LinkedIn if possible. Is there a way that you can make a connection with them during the interview? How did they excel into the position that they're in now? Have they moved up in the company? The answers to these questions may help you determine whether the organization will be a good fit for you. And finally, spend some time reading through reviews on Glassdoor or the Better Business Bureau. What do former employees have to say about their experience with the company? Is there any feedback about specific leaders? Try to get an overall feel for employee morale and company culture and whether that aligns with your personal work philosophy. Intentionally preparing questions to ask before an interview serves two purposes. It demonstrates to the interviewer that you are thoughtful and serious about the position, and the information that you glean from these questions can help you make an informed decision about whether the role is a good fit. Now, we've all heard the phrase, there's no such thing as a dumb question. And while that's true, there are a few things that you'll want to consider when preparing yours. You want to avoid asking about things that you could have found doing a quick search on Google or by looking on the company's website. This may give interviewers the impression that you're unprepared or that you didn't take any time to research the company beforehand. I'd also recommend steering clear of any questions regarding raises or bonuses until you've reached the salary negotiation stage. Of course, there are always standard logistical questions that you might be wondering, things like, what's your hiring timeline for this position? And it's totally acceptable to ask those types of questions. But consider what's truly important for you to learn about the position or the organization. Prepare questions about the role. What does a typical day look like? A great question you can ask to gauge how your skills stack up next to the position is, are there any areas where you feel I might lack the necessary skills or experience to be successful in this role? This also demonstrates your openness to receiving feedback and constructive criticism. Consider the culture of the organization. You might ask questions like, how would you describe your work environment? Or, why do you like working here? You might also want to ask questions about the team you'll be joining. Who would you be working with? And what does collaboration look like on that team? Maybe it's important for you to join a company that invests in their employees' growth and continued learning. Ask what professional development opportunities would be available or what their training and onboarding process looks like. Amy and Sarah, why don't you share the questions that you've prepared? We'll go ahead and start with Amy.
Okay, so the first question that I would ask is, what is the history of this position?
I love it. This is a great question. What this helps you learn is whether or not it's a new position or if someone is leaving the position, which may lead to a follow-up question about why that person's leaving. But most importantly, it helps you to frame in your mind what the expectations might be for you and if you'll be required to help create the position or if you'll be jumping into the deep end. How about your next question?
All right, I would ask, which part of this position has the steepest learning curve and how could I get up to speed?
Great. This question gets at two important points. First, it helps you as the interviewee to get a feel for what's going to be required and how much that you're going to have to learn. This could help you determine if this is the right job for you. But it also forces the interviewer to envision you in the position and think critically about your skills and experience to identify what you'd need to learn and how feasible that would be for you. What's next?
How about, how do managers support their employees in this company?
This question could help you get a better picture of what the leadership culture is like at the company. If the interviewer has a hard time answering this one, it could be a little bit of a red flag. Also, listen for answers that hint at a culture of micromanagement, as that could also be a red flag. What's your last question?
Well, in the past, I've always liked to ask this one. What do you like best about working here? And then what challenges do you face working here?
Great. This question can tell you a lot about the company's culture and opportunities for growth, while also providing you with insight about the people and teams that you'd be working with. Let's go ahead and see what Sarah has prepared. Sarah, what questions do you think would be most beneficial for you to ask your interviewer?
The first question I came up with was, how does this role contribute to the company's overall goals and objectives?
Yeah, this is a great question to help you understand the importance of the role within the company and ensure that the impact this role has is meaningful. It gives you insight into the company's goals and how the marketing team and their work fits into the broader strategy. You'll want to look for red flags like anything that doesn't quite align with your values or that makes the role feel like an afterthought rather than an integral position on the team.
Thank you for those red flags. I also thought I'd ask, what are the biggest challenges facing the marketing team right now?
Another great question. What you'll find here is that a candid response is an indication of a culture of transparency. It will also help you to see how the hiring manager, which is most likely the supervisor for the role, views challenges. You'll get a sense for whether those challenges are exciting things for you to tackle. Red flags to look for would be guarded answers or apparent lack of support in meeting those challenges. What else would you ask?
How do you measure success for this role?
Yeah, this is a pretty common question candidates may want to ask regardless of the industry because it can be a clear indicator of what you're walking into. It will help you to understand the expectations, potential advancement opportunities, especially when there's a clear path for taking advantage of those opportunities, and whether the metrics are both reasonable and achievable. Red flags here would be inability to answer this question clearly, unrealistic standards, or measures that aren't in line with your goals.
Thanks. So for my last one, I would ask, how would you describe the company's culture and values?
Hearing how an interviewer talks about the company beyond the words that they actually speak can tell you a lot about the culture of both the company and the team. Are they excited about working there? Do they agree with the company's values? Red flags to look for here would be a culture or values that don't align with your own, or an overwhelming sense that there's just something wrong with the company or team morale. These are all really great questions to ask a potential employer to help you decide if a role is right for you. So Amy and Sarah, both of you, nice work. Despite the average length of a job interview being around 40 minutes, over a third of employers surveyed reported that they know within the first 90 seconds if they plan to hire a candidate. Other than lack of qualifications, the factors that weigh into that snap decision include posture, handshake, fidgeting or playing with their hair, and eye contact. The majority of communication is nonverbal, so be mindful of what your body language, appearance, and behavior communicates to interviewers. While feeling nervous before an interview is perfectly normal, you'll want to come across as confident and professional. So put on your best smile, sit tall, and look the interviewer in the eye. And remember, less is more. When asked a question, aim to be as direct and succinct as possible. If you need some time to gather your thoughts, avoid rambling and instead ask the interviewer if you can come back to that question later. If you're interviewing in person, you'll want to bring at least 2 copies of your resume to provide the interviewer, a couple of working pens, and a small notepad or something to write on. And this is also a great place to have your prepared questions written down for reference. Avoid bringing a drink or travel mug into the building. You should have your briefcase or portfolio in one hand, leaving the other hand free to shake hands and greet the interviewer with. Make sure that your phone is off and tucked away in your pocket or briefcase, completely out of sight, until you've completed the interview and exited the building. For virtual interviews, it's a good idea to have a printed copy of your resume in front of you for easy reference without having to navigate over to a different tab on your computer. And similar to in-person interviews, always have a pen and paper at the ready to jot down any notes or questions that you have for the interviewer. As a general rule, you should treat virtual interviews as though you are interviewing in person. The only items that should be within your reach are the ones that you would carry with you into the interview. So again, your resume and a pen and paper. Be sure to leave your cell phone on silent in another room and wait until the interview is over to enjoy anything like snacks or gum. While it might be tempting to show up to a virtual interview wearing a blazer on top and pajama pants on bottom, I would advise against it. We've all heard the phrase, look good, feel good, and that phrase undoubtedly applies here. Dressing from head to toe in professional attire, and yes, even shoes, is proven to boost your confidence and improve your overall demeanor. Now, while many of the tips for in-person interviews apply, there are some additional considerations for virtual interviews. How you conduct yourself in a virtual interview will demonstrate to potential employers your ability to perform in a remote work environment. If your background is cluttered or noisy, or your internet connection is unstable, employers may question whether you're fit for the job. Your background is another potential area for bias to creep in. So make sure that your physical space is interview ready. The most ideal spot would be in front of a blank wall with minimal decor or anything that could be distracting to interviewers. Virtual backgrounds are also acceptable, but if you opt to use a virtual background, choose one that is clean and professional. You'll still want to prepare your physical space just in case the platform that you're interviewing on doesn't allow for virtual backgrounds. You also want to choose a location that is free from any noise disruptions, things like young children, pets, or even road construction. So make arrangements ahead of time to ensure that you have a quiet space free of distractions. Once you identify which platform you'll be interviewing on, whether it's Zoom, Cisco, Teams, etc., I recommend testing out the application in advance. Be sure to check that your internet connection is stable and that any equipment that you'll need is ready to go. It's important to demonstrate to the interviewer that you are technologically capable, which is the requirement of almost any remote role. And following up after the interview isn't a required step of the application process, but it may set you apart from other applicants and demonstrate to the employer that you're eager and dedicated to working for their organization. There are 2 instances where a thank you note may be appropriate. First is directly following the interview, and second, if you're waiting to hear back about a job offer. If you're following up after an interview, you should aim to send a thank you email within 24 hours to maximize its impact. Be sure to thank them for their time and express your enthusiasm to be considered for the position. You can also mention anything you forgot to mention during the interview, as long as it's pertinent to their consideration. Be sure to keep it professional and concise, and don't forget to check and double check your grammar and conventions. If you're still waiting on an offer 1 to 2 weeks later, it's appropriate to send an additional follow-up email reminding the employer that you're still interested in the role and that you're eager to hear from them. Now, if you receive a rejection email at any point, it's always best practice to respond by thanking them for the opportunity to interview. You can also let them know that you'd like to be considered for future positions at the company if that's true. Even if you don't land the job, it's always beneficial to connect and expand your professional network whenever possible. Now, with that, that concludes the final session of our series. So Amy and Sarah, I want to thank you both for taking the time to walk through this job search journey with me, from beginning your job search to building out your resume elements, to applying, and finally to practicing for that interview. It's been my pleasure to coach you, and I wish you both the best in your job search. And thank you to all of you who have joined us throughout the series or even just today. We hope this journey has been helpful for you all too. As a reminder, all 4 parts of this series can be found on our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it back over to Maxine.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So before we get to questions, which again, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the question box on your control panel. I did want to highlight, please do follow us on our social medias. That way you can get any information about upcoming webinars from there. We also do have a YouTube channel, which you can see down below. And you can basically see all of our previous webinars there. Now, as for questions, we did get one question come in so far. And you just talked a little bit about how to respond if you don't get the position. But how do you professionally decline a position if you no longer think it might be a fit for you, or if you've already taken another position that you were applying for?
Good question. Apparently none of us want to answer it. That's a good question. I think it's one thing I want to point out, Maxine, is that the professional part of it is really important. It's a small world. You never want to burn a bridge or upset someone. You just never know who's going to end up at the next place you want to work or something like that. I've interviewed with people for one job and literally came across them at the next job. That even happened to me here at Tutor.com. So it's really important to not burn a bridge. So if you feel comfortable calling the person to talk with them about it, of course, that's always a nice way to do it. But a lot of times that's hard. And so if you feel like you need to send an email and let them know what happened and that you've accepted another position. I mean, a lot of times it's not your fault for accepting another position. Maybe you were waiting too long to accept this one because they didn't move on it fast enough. So that would be important to give them feedback about, I waited for a while. I hadn't heard anything. I was interviewing for another position and it came up faster. Thank you so much for your time. I really loved meeting you, all that kind of thing. Be really positive about it, but that gives them good feedback about the fact that maybe they weren't moving quickly enough for you. So I would do that. Sarah, Jenna, any other thoughts about this one?
I think you answered it correctly.
I agree.
Okay, thanks.
Great job, Amy. We did get another question coming in, specifically talking about getting the rejection notice and when you're sending a thank you for their time. Can you also ask them about what you could have done differently or what you might be able to improve next time you're in an interview or something like that?
Sure, I think that's always acceptable. I just think be aware of people's time. We've had people before who kind of went back and forth several times, kept asking questions. And sometimes that I wouldn't do that. I would ask, do you have any feedback for me? And then, that's showing that you care enough to improve. And you just never know. Again, it's a small world. Who knows what kind of impression you're making there at the end, where they say, you know what? I really like the way that person followed up and cared enough to ask what they could do better, and that they might keep you in mind for something else. So I think that's a smart thing to do, but just take that information and run with it, and don't go back and forth too much or try to argue or say, well, I didn't mean it that way, or I thought I'm going to try to, I was going to, what I really meant was to say it like this, and I'm sorry I said it, but maybe you could give me another chance. Like, you don't want to do that. I've had that happen before too. Sarah, do you have any thoughts?
I get that question often. Amy and I have done at least 100 interviews for different open positions here at Tutor.com, and I would say that's the most common response, if we get a response at all, which is, thank you for your time. What do you think I could have improved on? Or where do you see holes, something that I could be working on for next time? So I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask. It could never hurt to ask. But I would agree with Amy that just ask, let them answer, and then be done with the conversation, because continuing to push it doesn't make you look any better, or arguing with them doesn't make you look better. But the fact that you asked the question is really all that's needed. Assuming that you really care. It'd be nice if you really cared about the answer too.
Awesome. Thank you both for that answer. It doesn't look like we have any other questions that have come in. So I'll go ahead and end the session for today. But again, thank you everybody who joined us today for joining us in this webinar series. We do hope that you found some of this information helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in some of our future webinar series. So have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.